This is the Power Break Podcast, number 108, titled The Gift of Time. Hi, I'm Bob Brubaker, along with JT, also known as John Trevino, as we hope you stay tuned as we seek to give you a little power in this break to help you succeed in the race of life.
This is the Power Break Podcast with a focus on the spiritual, the mental, and the physical aspects, all to help you succeed in the race of life. For show notes from today's podcast, go to bobbrubaker.com and follow the link for the Power Break Podcast. Bob, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing great. This is a highlight of my week that I get to record with you.
Me too, man. Me too.
This is, we're just a couple of guys having a good time, and actually... July, we had very good numbers of downloads. And
that's awesome, man.
We've surpassed the 3,000 mark of downloads.
That's so
Isn't
good.
It amazing?
It really is amazing.
I mean, two guys just having a good time here.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're glad that you have tuned in today, as you do, and also helped to spread the word about the Power Break Podcast, even on social media, wherever you use, wherever you download the podcast. Of course, it really helps to give us a rating and a review. And those 5-star ratings really do help to push it up the line.
Oh man, it sure do. I'm still blown away by the fact that there are people on the other coast that listen to us. There are people in Canada that listen to us. All that stuff just blows me away.
Yes, it's the World Wide Web, JT.
The World Wide Web. How do they stretch all those wires everywhere like that? Yeah. It's just weird, man.
I always get a report, from our sermon downloads from Sermon Audio from here at Christ Community Presbyterian Church. It just amazes me that there are people in the Netherlands that listen to the sermons. There are people, they give you a report from different states and then different countries, and it just blows my mind. It's like the number of people in Germany that listen to my sermons.
Oh, it's so good.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
anyway,
it's really good.
Hey, so what do you think of when I say the word steward or stewardship?
It's funny, man. It's I think of what we just talked about, right? We're using our time wisely, and it's actually God's using it in an incredible way.
Oh,
right?
yeah, and we're having a good time with it.
Yeah. So it's good stewardship. I think about time. I think we're going to talk about a lot today because, one of the big excuses I always hear all the time is, I just couldn't find the time. I couldn't find the time. Time. And really, you just have to look at what you spend your time on, and that will translate to what is most important to you. And that will translate to, is that good stewardship of the time that God has given you here? Because we're all finite in the amount of time that we're going to be here. We don't know when, right?
Exactly.
But we certainly don't have an infinite amount of time. So, look back and do you want to, what I think of is the conversation that I have when I'm in front of Christ, and is he going to say, well done, good and faithful servant? Or is he going to say, depart from me, you never knew me?
Yeah.
Those are the two things that scare me to death, But that's what I think about, and stewardship of the gifts that were given to me, like my kids and,
and your talent.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think about? Yeah.
Well, I think about stewardship. Of course, I think about making the best use of whatever God has put on our laps, because as we'll talk about from Matthew chapter 5, the parable of the steward the three people that were given talents by the Lord. And I think about that and say, well, how would I be held accountable for my time? And I'll talk more about this, but time was and is very valuable, and I became a student of time management right off the bat when I first ordained the ministry in 1983. Yeah. I was just kind of scared. How do I get all this stuff done?
Right.
And I asked an older minister, and he handed me a page out of his day timer that had the order blank. He said, order this and follow the directions, and you'll be all fine.
Yeah. No truer words.
That's right. Yeah. So how would you grade yourself on your time management?
It's funny, and you say when you first, got into the ministry, for me, it's when I first became a Christian, and, when I was approached and asked to lead a small group. That was actually the time when I really started to think about, okay, well, how do I spend my time?
Yeah.
And how can I honor this responsibility that's been given to me? Because that's what it is, right?
Exactly.
That's when I started to really look at my time. And since then, my kids always make fun of me. They know my schedule like inside and out. It's because they know it's a schedule. They know that Sunday is my busy day and they won't see me because I get up, hit the church at 7:30, and I go all the way until I get out of work at 11 o'clock at night. And then today is my other real busy day in the week. So when I get up, I exercise, I come here, and then I go to work right after I leave here. So, I would say I'm probably at a B plus at this point. Yeah. I don't know where you're at. Do you ever consider yourself an A?
No.
I mean, no, right?
Because you always think about where can I fill those, what about those little cracks and crevices? But then again, we have to understand that God is not an ogre. He even designed a weekly day off.
Right.
Which
most of us don't take.
Exactly. Yep. And so we're violating the command of the Sabbath, and we lose out on that. But the very fact that we understand that in order to get ahead, you push, and then you back off. And so even during the day, there's times that you need a break and just say, and that's all right.
Yeah.
A friend of mine, when I was in seminary, he took a break all the time and he would play video games. But he was very disciplined about it.
I was going to say, did he? But he didn't sit there all day eating bonbons, right?
He would study, and then he'd take 15-minute break and do video games, and then he'd be back to study. He was like the valedictorian of the seminary class.
He was a recharger, man. He knew how to recharge himself.
Exactly.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. So, actually, I got a question for you. As a pastor, I've always wondered, so obviously the Sabbath is built for relaxation. But if you are actually one of the elders or one of the leaders of a church, that's not necessarily the day that you're able to do that, right? So how does that how do you work your Sabbath in? Let's ask that.
Well, we need all to break from things, and I try to take Fridays just to kind of forget about things, although I find myself violating that from time to time, but I don't feel bad about it because really the rejuvenation, even of a pastor, is really in the worship of God. It's a rejuvenation,
right?
And so a person that is active, even in the church, okay, there is some work involved, but it is a rejuvenation there because you're spending time with God and worshiping Him, and spending time with the saints, and so it should be a rejuvenation. But pastors have a problem with that, and taking time off. That's a real. It's real easy to just work 7 days a week.
Yeah, but I bet.
I don't feel bad because of my health and the issues I have that I need to work out, and so I'm not feeling bad about the fact that I take time to work out, even our Saturday long rides.
But it makes you stronger. That's the thing is the rejuvenation part. A lot of us kind of forget that makes us stronger, and it's just as important to mentally rejuvenate yourself as it is spiritually and physically.
Exactly.
So you have to really just kind of, I'm always tempted to be like, all right, I'm a little bored. I'm going to pick, maybe I'll start doing like a brain game or something on my phone, or sit there and start doing whatever. And I'm like, what am I doing? That's it. Well, why am I continuing to work that thing out? Because it needs just as much of a rest as the rest of me, right?
Well, a brain game, though, is really good for your brain, so it's a way of relaxation.
It is, but relaxation is probably better sometimes.
Yeah, that's true, too.
Just to sit there and I dare people to try to think of nothing. It's almost impossible.
That's right. Well, well, here's the point. The Bible's clear that our time is not our own to do with as we please. Our time, our talent, and our treasure, or money, is actually God's, and He holds us accountable to make the most for His glory, and for that which He places in our hands, He looks for us to be accountable. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 15 through 17 read like this: Look carefully then how you walk, not as one unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is.
Pretty direct.
Very direct, yep.
Well, let's continue to talk about that as we turn to your blog. Folks, if you haven't been to BobBrubaker.com, I would always encourage you to do that. There's some really cool stuff there. I would encourage you to dive into the story about how Bob's one breath from death experience. There's just so many really cool resources there, and we've talked about a lot of the books. Plus, you can sign up for his blog. It'll show up every Monday. It's always an awesome thing for me. I wake up, it's there.
The MailChimp comes through.
MailChimp does not mess around. Let me tell you, I would hire him to clean my house for sure.
He only does mailers.
I just don't believe he does it, yeah. But yeah, every Monday you'll get it. And man, it's just just a great way to start your week, right? It's right after the Sabbath, and you're ready to go. But let's continue to talk about the gift of time, because time management really is of the utmost importance.
Oh, it
and
is.
We don't make it important sometimes.
It's amazing how, since we have all these time-saving devices, we waste more time than ever.
Yeah, right? It's like we lost our skill, right?
Well, the article is called The Gift of Time, the blog that is on my website, bobbrubaker.com. And just a few highlights here. There is something in which we are created equal, no matter where we live, how we live, or what color we are, what denomination we belong, or anything else. No matter what our background, we have 24 hours a day or 168 hours in a week.
Right.
Time is the great equalizing factor. Even though we all have the same amount of time, there are those who make the most of their time and accomplish much. Sadly, this number seems to be the minority, as on the other hand, there are many who waste most of their time and wonder why they accomplish very little.
Yeah.
So, how would you score your stewardship of 168 hours in a week that has been placed in your hands, for which you're told to make the most? In case you need a refresher course on stewardship, I quoted there put down the Matthew 25, verses 14 through 30, the account of the steward who gave 5 talents to one of his servants, another he gave 2, and another he gave 1. And he came back after a while, and he asked the person to whom he gave 5 what he had done with it, and he said, "I've gained 5 more talents." And he says,
Awesome.
"Well done, good and faithful servant." He asked the one to whom he gave 2 talents, and he said, "I've gained 2 more talents." He says, "Well done, good and faithful servant." He asked the one who had received 1, he said, "Well, I knew you were a hard man, and you didn't reap where you were sow, and you gathered where you scattered no seed." So he said, "I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here's what is your talent." The master looked at him and said, "You wicked and slothful servant, you knew that I reap where I had not sown and gather where I scattered no seed. Well, then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming you would have received what is my own with interest. So take the talent of him and give it to him who has 10 talents. To everyone who has will be more given to him, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away." And then he cast out the worthless servant into the outer darkness, in the place where there be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
It's because the worthless servant was selfish.
He was selfish.
He was selfish.
He was slothful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he looked at it as, I don't want to take the chance. I don't want to put any work into this. So I'll just put it away and give it back to him when he gets here.
Now, so look at that as it applies to time. God is clear in his word that he expects us to make the most of whatever he places in our hands, albeit time or talent or treasure. He is owner, and we are simply stewards of his riches. It may be a new concept, since most of us feel that at least act like our time is something that belongs to us, to which we can do as we please. Look again at the parable above, as we pointed out to Matthew 25. As Jesus said, anything that he, the owner, the master, places in our trust, he is looking for a return on the investment. So Ephesians 5 says, look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of your time, for your days are evil. You know, JT, just to deviate here, because we're just going to give some highlights of this blog that's on bobbrubaker.com, but I was thinking about talent, and, you have talent with guitar, but you apply yourself.
I try, yeah. Sometimes
right.
I'm very successful. Sometimes I'm not.
Obviously, it's not your main employment or your main.
I would love it to be.
Yeah,
yeah.
But over the years, you have not just thrown it into the corner.
Yeah.
And so, I know from your discussion that, you have music to play on Sundays, and so you come prepared.
Yep.
You have rehearsed and you are ready to go.
Yep.
And so you're making the best use of that talent,
Right. And it's funny for me that other people don't really understand that concept. Like I've heard a lot of people say, "Oh, well, it's not like you're getting paid. I mean, just kind of do the best you can." And I'm like, "Well, if I'm going to do the best I can, whether I'm getting paid or not, number one, because it's worship of the Lord. Mm-hmm. I don't ever expect to get paid for that."
Yeah.
But on the other side of it too, it's like you don't feel bad at all that you didn't prepare. I don't even understand that. Like, one of my friends used to joke around about, "Oh, it's the Catholic guilt that you were raised with," and I'm like, it's not Catholic guilt. It's that I fear the Lord and I respect the fact that He's given me this talent to use.
Exactly.
Man. for years. And that was when I got into actually playing worship. I got pulled into it by one of our old worship pastors, Matt. And I had no indication that I was ever going to go in that direction. Like none at all. I just knew I used to play guitar, hadn't picked it up in a long time. You just kind of moved on. I'm a cop now, and I don't have time for that or whatever. Matt just basically was like, "Hey, I know you play guitar. You've talked about it. I really need you." And
there you go.
And it was really that easy. And now I can't imagine not playing guitar for worship. And I actually came to understand that I learned guitar for that purpose way back, right? I mean, I got a lot out of it when I was younger, for sure.
That is an important thing.
But the reason why I learned guitar way back when was so I could honor God now.
Yeah.
That's the way you got to kind of look at everything.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And that's being a good steward of, making the most of your talent. And what we're talking about today is in the way of time. That's why Colossians 4 says, conduct yourself wisely toward outsiders, making the best use of time. Even though we have many time-saving devices today, too often we get caught up in the trap of procrastinating the things that could or should be done in lieu of just wasting time.
Right.
When you think about it, whatever the cause of wasting time is, it robs you from the precious commodity of which you have a limited supply, namely time. The Bible is clear about falling prey to things that steal our time, such as sleep. Proverbs 24, a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come on you like a robber, like an armed man.
Wow. There you go.
Yeah. Well, nobody can work 24 hours a day. Of course, there is a need for rest, but we have to watch out that it doesn't take over our lives. So here's a little help that I came up with in the article that is not anything new, but in organizing time, just so you make a difference, applying ourselves to the serious inspection of our time, first of all, and noting the things that rob us. Now, like any other aspect of life, it takes personal discipline and daily dying to self and offering our time in submission to God. But one of the things I encourage you to do is keep a log of the things that you do for a week.
That is a great way to do it. Yep.
It's just like if you want to get a handle on your eating, if you have some eating problems, overeating, just keep a diary of all the things you eat, and then you look back and then say, "Ooh, I didn't realize I was eating
calories,
so many M&Ms or whatever it was." And here the same thing with there are many things that you could look at that are wasting time.
Yeah.
Okay. And so just an article about that is called The Gift of Time, realizing that God gifts you with 168 hours a week and expects you to make the most of it. So check it out at BobBrubaker.com. It's called The Gift of Time.
So what else is going on, Bob? Anything new?
Well, it seems like I have a build-up here for this, but nevertheless, it is a book that I wrote on the power of time management. It is at BobBrubaker.com, and you can check it out when you go to my website, BobBrubaker.com. Click on the link for the resources, and then scroll down to the books, and scroll through the books. You'll find it, The Power of Time Management. And basically what I've done is just outline some of the things in the article in more detail, but you'll find that I trust it'll be a helpful start of a disciplined life of time management. It will not only bring you more, kind of satisfaction of getting things done.
It does.
But also give you the encouragement that God is pleased because you're making the best use of the time that He's placed in your hands. While you're at BobBrubaker.com, check out the sermon links on the website there. Sermon links to the sermons I preach here at Christ Community Presbyterian Church. Continuing this summer through the month of August, going through the book of Psalms. I pick out a section of Psalms each year. We're continuing on. And this summer was 53 through 63, and there's some good stuff there.
Oh, it's been wonderful, man. I've really appreciated it.
Yeah. It's some good stuff in the book of Psalms. And people can identify with the psalmist because it's real-life people with real-life problems.
I was going to say, David is... he always gives me comfort, in all honesty, because I know he was a man of God's own heart, and I also know that, man, he went through some pretty tough times, like we're going through as a society. Right?
Exactly. It just seems like God prepared it for this time, but it's exactly what it is. David's a man after God's own heart, but he experiences difficulty.
He does.
And we learn what trusting God and praising God is all about when he talks about it and how he does it. And this week, as I'm getting prepared to preach from Psalm 60, David faces a major defeat. Wow, what do you do when things go wrong?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what he actually comes up with, a beautiful lament as he turns to God. So anyway, that's all on the website, bobbrubaker.com. Check out the sermon links, and it's all part of the website there.
All right, so here we go. It's time for What About This? That's time for questions and answers on the podcast. Feel free to submit your questions by email to jt@bobbrubaker.com, and we'll get to answering those in an upcoming Power Break podcast. And keep the questions coming. We really love it, and we really appreciate you taking a couple of minutes to send us something just to let us know what's on your mind, because we'd love to talk about it.
Yeah.
For sure. All right, question number 1. From the spiritual side of life, let's keep hammering this home. Why is it so important to look at time as something for which we are stewards and not owners? Because we, as a society, have become very self-centered when it comes to our time. And it's very unhealthy.
Yeah.
Very unhealthy.
It is. Even so much so that God says through the writing of the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, do you not know that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit within you, whom you have from God? You are not your own. You were bought with a price, so glorify God in your body. So we hear it as a Presbyterian. We hold on to the Westminster Confession of Faith, and it says, "What is the duty of man?" He said, and the answer is in the shorter catechism is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. And if that's the purpose of life, notice what it says in 1 Corinthians 10, verse 31. Whether you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God. And so we back up and say, okay, am I using my time for the glory of God?
Pretty simple question.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean that God expects you to work 24 hours a day. There is rest involved, and there is time of relaxation. That's not bad.
Yep.
But when that becomes our life and becomes what we live for,
yep,
it now has become a little idol. It takes away from our serving God. So he says it in Proverbs 3, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make straight your paths. So when it comes to time management, okay, God expects us to make the most because He's the owner, He's the steward, and He's the owner, so we're to be stewards and report on our stewardship to Him.
Right.
And as we saw in the parable of the talents, those words, as you quoted before, that you want to be heard, well done, good and faithful servant, versus you wicked and slothful servant.
Yeah, bad and selfish servant is not the way you want to be.
Yeah.
So from the mental aspect, I mean, this really, as always, the mental and the spiritual are so interconnected. But how can we get a handle on our time to make the most of it? Like, how can we mentally exercise ourselves and categorize it? You know?
I think, first of all, starting, as I mentioned in the article, to make a log of your time for a week and see where you're spending your time. That's so important because just taking I always call it a 50,000-foot view of, the whole week at a time,
right.
168 hours. So where was it going? You know, what time of the day did you go to bed on a regular basis, and how much time did you spend in bed? And then, some people spend hours in front of the television in the evening.
Yep.
Or, maybe doing something else that is maybe could be profitable or not profitable. So, and we have to ask ourselves, is it fulfilling the purpose for which God has called us? Is it fulfilling that? Okay, so we need to make needed adjustments, and then, of course, disciplining ourselves to making those adjustments, which may require a friend or a counselor to hold us accountable. After you get a handle on the change, it's a matter of just keeping the flow going.
Right.
But the hard part is taking that snapshot of the week and then saying, where do I need to change here? We recognize also that God recognizes we need a break, and that's why He scheduled a weekly requirement of a break, of refreshment, rejuvenation, called the Sabbath. We call it the Lord's Day. The principle then is to push hard and back off. So scheduling time to let off the pedal and do something is also important. It's also important to set limits to the activity which you find a recreation
Oh, yeah, because those can definitely. Yeah, that's where my idols will brew out of, for sure. Exercise and.
Well, if you don't set a limit on those things, that it takes over.
Yep, it does.
And then it's a time consumer rather than a time enhancer.
Yep.
So I think the first thing is just having a, you mentioned that your kids know Dad's schedule.
Yep.
Okay. And, every week I have a schedule in which I plug in different appointments other than my normal schedule.
Yep.
And every week I print it out for Jan so she knows exactly what's going on.
Yep.
And what I have scheduled. And so sometimes it says, it looks the same as it always does. Well,
that's okay.
That's okay.
That's okay. Yeah.
That's okay.
Yep. Yeah. I did that exercise that you talked about, kind of took, a bird's eye view of everything. And, that was because I always make it a priority. I spend at least, except for the 2 days that I don't really see them, but on the days that I have time, I spend at least 2 hours with my kids.
Oh, that's great.
Doing something where it's just the three of us doing something, about 75% of the time. It ends when the two start fighting with each other, but whatever, right?
They're boys.
I already know how that's going to end.
Yeah.
But I know that it's the time spent with them that's the really important part. But what I ended up seeing the last time I did that was Amy and I our time has been cut together, right? Now, part of that I don't know how to fix just because of our schedule to a certain extent, because she's got to work and I got to work. And when she's working, I try to occupy the kids so they don't interfere with her because she's working from home. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of kind of that. But you never know that unless you look at it. And that was really it. So I looked and I was like, ooh, this is an area. That's how I knew this is an area I want to focus a little bit more on.
And that's good for the two of you to talk about that, that you recognize that as a need in your marriage.
Yeah.
And if you didn't look at the schedule, like you said, take that bird's eye view,
I would have never known it.
You would
have never paid attention to it. Yep. Yeah.
Hats
super important.
Off to you, JT.
Hats off. All right. So we are going to turn to the physical. I'm pretty sure our listeners knew that was going to happen at some point or another, because it is so important.
Because that is our pattern.
So important. That's it. Yeah, we have a pattern. So turning to the physical aspect of life, why is it so important to have a training partner? You and I have actually partnered back up again in the category of swimming.
That's right.
Which is pretty awesome.
You can check it out at the Clearwater Beach on Thursday morning. There's Bob and JT. Matter of fact, they even took our picture last week.
I know. Yeah, Amy was like, hey, I saw you on the internet. I'm like, oh, no.
Of course, it was our backside as we were walking into the water. But then,
was it? That's funny.
Anyway, so the value of a training partner is accountability to show up. The extra push you get from a partner, as well as the consolation. Just like when we were in the consolation, when JT and I are swimming and these people pass us and go, they're very fast. And then we just say, yeah, we console one another. But the main thing is the accountability. That's the secret of a health club, by the way. That's why when you join a health club, they encourage you to bring a friend. They even have financial incentives to do that.
Of course. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's because it's not just to make the money off your friend. They know you're more apt to use the club and get the benefits of the club if you have a friend join at the same time.
That's 100% correct.
And if you do that, you'll renew. There's a story of accountability I like to say when I talk about this, because when I lived in Ohio, I ran with a friend who was an ultra marathoner. His name was Joe Sullivan, and Joe was also a clinical psychologist, which was interesting.
That is interesting.
Anyway, we would run together, and every Thursday morning we would run a 10-mile course through the woods. And one Thursday morning we showed up, and there was a blizzard. I mean, it was like 27 degrees. The wind was blowing, and there was like a foot of snow, and the snow was coming down. And we both pulled in nearly the same time. We got out of our cars, and the first thing that both of us said to one another is almost in unison: if I didn't know you were going to be here, I would not be here. So there's accountability.
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the nice thing about it, we ran that 10 miles, and as we were going through the woods, you know how when you're in snow, everything becomes quiet?
Oh, man, yeah.
And when you're in the woods, it also is quiet. And it's like we ran, and all you heard was our footsteps, and It was just really.
It was probably beautiful.
It was, and it was invigorating. It didn't feel nearly as cold as it was. Anyway, that's my story. The value of a training partner. I'm sure you have one.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, the biggest thing is the show up thing, but I can use my wife actually as a great example of that. She actually, during the COVID thing, she found Camp Gladiator, and those guys do an awesome job. And basically, it's fitness. Before, it was all based on you go to a location and you guys all meet together and you guys all do these things together. And it's all based on body weight, and it's really good exercise. Mm-hmm. Well, when COVID hit, she started to look around because they started to offer their virtual options, and you could go to any trainer you wanted around the country. Now she's like, her trainer, Ari? It's Ari or Ori? Ari, I think. I'll hear them making fun of each other. You know what I mean? Like over the internet, like to each other, like, "Hey, Amy, I don't see you using," or "What's that black thing right next to you?" And she'll be like, "What? Is it a bug or something?" Because she does it outside. You would be like, "No, that black thing with the 2 weights on the end of it. You should probably pick that up." But, so you hear like conversations like that.
That's good.
But because of that, she's way more motivated.
Oh, sure.
She's way more involved. It becomes a part of her lifestyle. And it's something that she's locked into. And that's what happens with a partner. That's what happens with another person. You two become goal-oriented together, and you become more powerful when you do that, right? It's through connection. I mean, God built us for connection.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful picture. That's why a person should always be a member of a local church, because there's accountability.
100%.
Yep. Anyway, we get off on that a lot. Anyway, it takes discipline to train with another person, and discipline does make a difference. As we say, discipline makes the difference in all aspects of life. Check out today's show notes at BobBrubaker.com. Click on the click on the Power Break podcast at BobBrubaker.com. Today is show number 108.
And submit your questions by email to jt@bobbrubaker.com and listen to Bob's answer or my answer on an upcoming Power Break podcast.
That's right. Well, we want you to check out the book, The Power of Time Management. We've talked a lot about time management today, and of course, encourage you to check out the article, the blog at BobBrubaker.com called The Gift of Time, but also the book that we have called The Power of Time Management. So you just click on the books and scroll through the books. You'll find The Power of Time Management. Check it out today at BobBrubaker.com.
Well, thank you for joining us for the Power Break podcast. Please subscribe and leave a review wherever you've downloaded the podcast, and check out news, notes, Bob's weekly blog, and other really cool things at BobBrubaker.com. And listen next time for the Power Break podcast.